Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into some really interesting stuff today,
Yeah.
unpacking some common misconceptions we have about the history of Western Civ.
Okay.
And to do that,
Right.
we're going to be using this lecture from the YouTube channel, the Austin School.
Okay.
It's called How Islam Saved Western Civilization.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. It
Yeah.
really challenges a lot of those traditional
Yeah.
Eurocentric narratives that we often hear, and I think it's going to kind of blow your mind a little bit.
Absolutely. And you know what's really captivating about this lecture is how it really kind of forces us to think beyond these simplistic East versus West divisions.
Right.
And really appreciate the complex tapestry of influences
Yeah.
that shaped our world.
It makes you realize just how much we tend to focus on Europe when talking about history.
Yeah.
The lecture starts by tackling this idea that the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD.
Right.
I mean, that's what we all learned in school, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the lecture argues that this date doesn't really tell the whole story.
Oh, okay.
Well, 476 AD did mark, a significant shift for the Western Roman Empire.
Oh, right.
The Eastern Roman Empire, which was centered in Constantinople,
Right.
that flourished for nearly another millennium.
Wow, 1,000 years.
1,000 years.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So focusing on 476 AD as like the fall of Rome
Yeah.
creates kind of a distorted timeline.
It does.
And it reinforces this whole idea
Yeah.
of a dark age
Yeah.
descending upon Europe afterwards.
And that's another point that the lecture really challenges.
Oh.
This period, often portrayed as, a time of intellectual stagnation in Europe, was actually a time of incredible intellectual and cultural vibrancy.
Wow.
Especially in the Islamic world.
Okay.
In fact, the lecture argues that these historical periods with their, neat labels are somewhat arbitrary.
Right.
And can lead us to overlook significant contributions from non-European cultures.
So if we're rethinking the fall of Rome, it makes you wonder where Western civilization truly began, right?
Yeah, the lecture suggests that the roots of Western civilization stretch far beyond Greece and Rome,
Okay.
reaching back to the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt.
Mesopotamia and Egypt. So we're talking about
Yeah.
the cradle of civilization itself.
Exactly.
Like the very origins of organized societies, writing systems,
Yes,
monumental architecture.
exactly. And the lecture highlights
Yeah.
these fascinating cultural practices and innovations that originated in these regions
Okay.
and profoundly influenced what we consider Western today. Take musical instruments, for example.
Okay.
Did you know that instruments like the harp and even surprisingly the bagpipes originated in ancient Mesopotamia?
Wait, bagpipes.
Yeah.
I always thought those were
right?
associated with Scotland.
Yeah.
I never would have guessed that their roots go back that far.
It's a fantastic example of how interconnected cultures are.
Right.
And how easily we make assumptions about origins.
Totally.
The bagpipes were later adopted by the Celts during their migrations.
Okay.
And eventually became a prominent part of Scottish culture.
That really flips the script on our understanding of cultural exchange.
It does.
And speaks of connections,
Yeah.
the lecture emphasizes the role of the Mediterranean Sea. Wasn't so much a barrier between civilizations, but more like a highway.
Precisely. The Mediterranean really facilitated the exchange of knowledge, ideas, and goods
Wow.
between all these diverse cultures surrounding its shores. This challenges the traditional view of oceans as dividers
Okay.
and encourages us to view them as connectors.
Interesting.
Think about it. How would history have unfolded differently
Yeah.
if we saw oceans as bridges instead of barriers?
That's a really intriguing question.
It is.
It makes you realize that geography isn't just about physical landscapes.
Right.
It's about the ways in which those landscapes shape human interaction and the flow of ideas.
And when it comes to the flow of ideas,
Yeah.
the lecture dives deep into the Islamic Golden Age,
Okay.
a period that really challenges this whole notion of a dark age in Europe.
This is the part that really blew me away.
Yeah.
The lecture describes how Islamic scholars preserved ancient Greek and Roman texts
Right.
during a time when Europe was, well, let's just say, not exactly prioritizing intellectual pursuits.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
These texts, which formed the foundation of Western thought,
Right.
were kept alive and studied
Yeah.
thanks to the work of scholars in the Islamic world.
And they didn't just preserve this knowledge.
No, they did.
They built upon it in groundbreaking ways.
They did.
The lecture highlights advancements in mathematics, science, medicine, and philosophy made during the Islamic Golden Age.
Yeah.
Advancements that fundamentally shaped the world we live in today.
Yeah.
For example, I was fascinated by the story of Al-Khwarizmi.
Oh.
He was this Persian mathematician
Right.
who essentially invented algebra.
He did.
Can you imagine a world without algebra?
I can't.
I mean, how would we even function?
I know, right? And
Yeah.
his work wasn't just theoretical.
Yeah.
He developed the concept of algorithms, which are the backbone of modern computer science.
Wow.
Think about the impact this had on fields like cryptography, artificial intelligence.
That's crazy.
It's mind-boggling.
And it wasn't just Al-Khwarizmi.
No.
The lecture talks about Ibn Sina,
Yeah.
whose canon of medicine was like a cornerstone of medical knowledge for centuries.
It was.
And his emphasis on preventative health care
Right.
and his systematic approach to understanding diseases was way ahead of its time.
Absolutely. Ibn Sina's work had a profound impact on the development of medicine in both the East and the West.
Wow.
And then there's Al-Haytham, who made incredible contributions to optics, including the development of the camera obscura.
Wow.
He even developed early theories about gravity and the speed of light.
It's incredible to think about how much these scholars achieved during a time
I know.
that's often misrepresented as a period of intellectual darkness.
Right.
It really makes you question
It does.
those simplistic historical narratives, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And it leads us to another crucial question.
Okay.
If the Islamic Golden Age was so influential,
Yeah.
why do we often see Islamic civilization presented as separate from, or even opposed to, Western civilization?
That's a great question, and it's one that the lecture tackles head on
It does.
by exploring this concept of Orientalism.
Orientalism, as the lecture explains, is a way of thinking
Okay.
that creates this artificial divide between the East and the West.
Uh-huh.
It portrays the East as exotic, mysterious,
Yeah.
and often inferior to the West.
So it's a way of othering,
It is.
of creating a sense of us versus them.
Right.
And it's this kind of thinking.
Yeah.
The lecture argues that leads us to overlook the deep connections
Yes.
and mutual influences
Exactly.
between cultures.
The lecture challenges us to move beyond the simplistic framework. Right.
And to recognize the fluidity and complexity
Yeah.
of cultural exchange.
Okay.
It prompts us to ask,
Yeah.
what happens when we start to see the connections instead of the divisions?
That's where things get really interesting, and that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
It's fascinating how the lecture uses the title, How Islam Saved Western Civilization.
Yeah.
You know, to challenge our very understanding of history.
I know at first I thought it meant that Islam, came in and rescued Western Civ from some outside force.
Right, but what he's doing with the title is he's actually highlighting a deliberate contradiction.
Oh.
Because his point is that Islam didn't swoop in to save the day.
Okay.
It was intertwined with Western civilization from the very beginning.
Okay.
It was always part of the story.
So it's less about a rescue mission
Yeah,
and more about recognizing that inherent connection
right.
between these two supposedly separate worlds.
Precisely, and yet, as we were just discussing, this perception of separation persists.
Right. Often fueled by that Orientalist thinking that we were talking about.
Yeah.
The lecture delves into how this framework creates a false dichotomy,
Right.
distorting our understanding of history and leading us to miss those crucial connections.
Are there specific historical examples
Okay.
that challenge this artificial East-West divide?
Absolutely.
Where the lines get so blurred that the very idea of separation seems absurd.
The lecture provides some compelling examples that really make you reconsider those neat categories we often impose on history.
Okay.
One that stands out is the influence of Islamic legal practices
Okay.
on Western law.
Like the concept of community property divorce we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. This legal concept, which originated in Islamic Spain,
Oh, wait.
made its way into Western legal systems, demonstrating the fluidity of cultural exchange.
So it wasn't a case of one civilization imposing its ideas on another.
Right.
It was more of like an interaction and adaptation.
It was a process of adaptation, and integration.
Integration, yeah. So it's not about one civilization being superior or inferior.
Right.
But about recognizing the ways in which they influenced and enriched each other.
Precisely. And the lecture points out that these connections are also evident in language.
Oh, okay.
Think about how many common English words
Uh-huh.
actually have Arabic roots. Words like admiral, zenith, algebra, and even zero.
Yeah, we use these words every day without even realizing their origins.
Right.
Pretty powerful reminder of how much we owe to Arabic culture.
It is, and it goes beyond individual words.
Okay.
The lecture also highlights the fascinating story of the taco.
Oh, yeah.
Which we often think of as a quintessentially Mexican dish.
I mean, tacos are a staple in so many cultures now, not just Mexico.
Exactly, but their history is more complex than we might realize.
Interesting.
The taco, as we know it today, is a fusion of indigenous Mexican ingredients and culinary techniques with influences from the Arab world. It's a delicious example of how cultural exchange can lead to unexpected and truly delightful results.
I love that analogy, the culinary tapestry.
Yes.
Woven from threads of diverse traditions.
It is.
It makes you wonder what other hidden connections are out there just waiting to be discovered.
That sense of discovery is what makes this lecture so engaging.
Right.
It encourages us to look beyond the surface and to appreciate the complexity of cultural interactions.
So it's not just about acknowledging that these connections exist.
Right.
It's about understanding how they continue to shape our world today.
Precisely. It's about seeing history not as a static collection of facts,
Okay.
but as a dynamic process that continues to unfold. And this brings us to the question of how we can actively engage with history in a way that reflects this understanding.
I'm all ears.
The lecture offers a few suggestions.
Yeah.
Well, the lecture emphasizes the importance of critical thinking.
Right.
It encourages us to question those narratives. That present history as a linear progression from Greece and Rome to modern Europe, ignoring the contributions of other civilizations.
So it's about looking beyond those grand sweeping narratives.
Yeah.
And asking ourselves whose voices are being amplified and whose are being silenced.
Exactly, and hand in hand with critical thinking. The lecture encourages us to seek out diverse perspectives.
Right.
Reading history from multiple viewpoints allows us to gain a more nuanced understanding of the past and challenge our own biases.
It's about broadening our horizons.
Yes.
And recognizing that history is not a monolithic entity.
Right.
It's a kaleidoscope of diverse voices and experiences.
I love how you phrase that.
And building on this idea, the lecture highlights the importance of recognizing that cultural exchange isn't just something that happened in the past.
Right.
It's an ongoing process that continues to shape our world today.
You got it. And the lecture provides a great example of this with al pastor.
Al pastor.
A Mexican dish with Arabic influences. The al pastor taco, with its blend of flavors and culinary techniques, is a testament to the enduring legacy of those early cultural encounters.
So it's a delicious reminder that cultures are not static entities.
They're not.
But dynamic systems that constantly interact, influence, and enrich each other.
And that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The lecture challenges us to move beyond simply acknowledging this interconnectedness and to actively engage with it.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the contributions of all peoples to our shared human story.
Right.
And challenging those narratives that seek to divide us.
It's been such an eye-opening discussion so far. It's challenging those assumptions I didn't even realize I held, and it's making me see the world in a whole new light.
I agree. It's intellectually stimulating and, frankly, a bit mind-blowing at times.
It definitely is, but I think that's what makes this deep dive so valuable.
It is.
It's not about memorizing facts and dates.
Right.
It's about fundamentally shifting our perspective and understanding the interconnectedness of human history. You know, it's amazing how this lecture manages to connect something as like simple as a taco to these larger themes of cultural exchange and historical interconnectedness.
It's a testament to his skill as a lecturer, you know, weaving together these seemingly disparate threads into this cohesive and thought-provoking narrative, you know, constantly encouraging us to look for those unexpected connections, to see how history is not just a collection of isolated events, but a tapestry woven from, you know, countless threads of human interaction.
And that brings us back to the lecture's central question.
Yeah.
How does recognizing Islam's contributions to Western civilization change our understanding of both?
Well, for me, it challenges the very notion of Western civilization as like a distinct and separate entity.
Okay.
You know, it highlights the fluidity and interconnectedness of cultures.
Right.
Demonstrating that what we often perceive as Western is actually a product of countless influences. Including the profound contributions of Islamic civilization.
Yeah, I think that's a key takeaway. Recognizing that Western civilization, as we've traditionally understood it, is not this monolithic static entity, but a dynamic product of interactions and influences from all over the world.
Exactly. And seeing Islam's role not as an outsider or savior, but as an integral part of this complex tapestry, really forces us to rethink those simplistic East versus West paradigms that have shaped so much of our thinking.
It's about recognizing the shared heritage and interconnectedness of these supposedly separate worlds.
It is.
It's about breaking down those artificial barriers and appreciating the richness and complexity of our shared human story.
And that recognition has implications not just for how we understand the past, but also for how we approach the present and the future.
That's what I find so powerful about this lecture.
Yeah.
It's not just about rewriting history textbooks. It's about challenging us to think differently about the world we live in today. It's about recognizing the enduring legacy of those historical interactions and how they continue to shape our lives.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a call to action.
Okay.
An invitation to continue exploring, questioning, and challenging those narratives that seek to divide us. It's a reminder that we have a responsibility to engage with history critically. And to strive for a more inclusive and interconnected understanding of our shared human story.
This deep dive has been such an eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
It's challenged my assumptions, expanded my understanding of history, and left me with a sense of wonder and a desire to learn more.
I know, it's really sparked a fire in me to keep digging deeper.
Yeah, me too.
To keep questioning and to keep searching for those connections that reveal the true complexity of our world.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of engaging with thought-provoking material like this lecture. It's not about arriving at definitive answers. It's about embracing the journey of discovery and allowing ourselves to be challenged by new perspectives.
It's about realizing that history is not just something we learn in school. But a living, breathing tapestry that we're all a part of.
Exactly.
And we have a responsibility to ensure that tapestry reflects the full richness and diversity of human experience.
Beautifully said. So to our listeners out there, I encourage you to keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the conversation going.
Yes.
Share your insights and newfound knowledge with others. Let's challenge those old paradigms together and create a more nuanced and inclusive understanding of our shared history.
This is definitely a deep dive worth talking about.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey of discovery. We'll see you next time for another fascinating deep dive.
سرى رأيت